as well.
Loved it.
Yeah, you did too.
I was storage engineering, and I had a secretary, so I'm not very computer literate.
Good evening and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting for September 5th, 2023. We have a pretty packed agenda tonight, so we'll get right into it. We're going to go over some Fincom committee appointments, look at department liaisons for FY25, talk about the CPA increase and alternatives that we heard from the CPC committee last week. We're going to talk about the lights and tennis courts once Alicia from Park and Rec comes. We'll talk about member input, public input, go over the minutes, and adjourn. I do have one thing that didn't make our minutes, our agenda, unfortunately, but we need to cover it because the bill is late. It's a $190 bill from the Association of Town Finance Committees. It's for our dues for this calendar year, fiscal year. So I will need a motion to approve those.
Move that we approve them.
bill.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you. I'll get that off to Michelle in accounting, tell her that we've approved that bill. We have committee appointments. So we have a bunch of committees that a Fincom rep is supposed to be named to. I'm on the Shaker Lane Building Committee. You are on the,
Police and fire.
no, committee appointments. You're on the CPC,
CPC, yeah.
and you're on the,
TAC, Transportation Advisory Committee or Commission or...
do we have, and Al is on the
Town
Town
administrator.
Administrator Search Committee. Are there any others that we're on?
And the thing is, I have a, every week, can't make it scheduled, structural, I can't make their meetings. So, would behoove us to appoint someone else.
Behoove us. Is anybody interested in going to the CPC meetings?
What are they, Brian?
Carolyn, when do they
It's,
meet?
it's,
Third Wednesday,
Third Wednesday of every
every
month.
month, yep.
and that's just always and it's not something I can move.
And it seems to work the best, so.
I'm okay staying the rep who never attends, but that seems kind of lame. And given silence, maybe that's what we... Okay, there you
You
go.
volunteered.
I tried.
Be on CPC.
You start early though, right?
7,
Oh, 7?
yeah. I mean, after this is done, it's not real heavy lifting, especially for finance. Depending on,
That's usually the time around town meetings.
town meeting is the busiest, but a lot of times it's because of people coming to us and it's, a meeting. There's not a lot of homework for, it's just, communicating with the finance group, which is important.
Well, if you meet at 7, I could probably do that.
And we are taping them now, so if you couldn't make one, you could all go back and watch it.
Where do you meet?
Here.
In here, okay.
Yeah, we do hybrid. We've been doing hybrid lately, so.
What
Thank you
did
very
he
much.
say he was on? I didn't hear him either.
And what's the other one? TAC.
So TAC, it's a tough meeting time. It's, I forget what...
Transportation Advisory.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's on, once a quarter, but
Once every 6 weeks or so.
Yeah,
It's not,
it's just, they meet at like 5:30, so it's tough to...
the timing is
the timing's
awful.
really tough.
Because I'm the CPC rep, the COA rep to it. And the timing is horrible, 5:30 at night.
Yeah, I don't mind doing it. You're kind of saying as Brian, I just can't make it with work most of the time. We also officially have a backup spot as well. There's like an alternate for it. So, if someone wanted to know what's about, there's the alternate spot as well. They've been struggling because they haven't been able to have a quorum at a lot of their meetings. So I think the last 2 or 3 meetings, they haven't had a quorum, so they haven't been able to hold any business. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a loose charge, right? I mean, they're just charged with, Council on Aging comes in, Marin usually comes in, just to kind of an advisory commission to hear about transportation issues in town, but not.
Highway Department seems to be the most active there and comes the most often, the DPW.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, I think it's fairly. I mean, it was a much more active group when Gary LaCroix was heading it up. Now I feel like it's kind of become a little less active.
Any volunteers?
Right. Well, I will continue to.
It's too early.
Yeah, I'll continue to do my best to attend every once in a while for now, and then eventually there'll be a vacancy there.
Okay. Thank you. I think we're
Fred,
good.
what did you say you were on? I couldn't hear. Are you on anything? Oh, okay. That's why I didn't hear you.
He's keeping his mouth shut, you notice?
All right, department liaisons for FY25 budget session. Someone was supposed to send me a list, but they didn't.
Yeah, that looks right me.
So I think last year I took the finance areas, Infosys and HR. I'm totally willing to take those on again. And generally, for Jenna's benefit here, so we have a liaison from the finance committee to each department in town. Basically sit down after they develop their budget, sit down, go through it with them. You kind of become their advocate, maybe not advocate's the right word, but the person who's most knowledgeable about their budget outside of their area. And this year, we're going to actually have a meeting where everybody, after they meet, they come back and they talk about the budgets. Once we get the budget books and we know what the budgets are, and go through them, and you can say what you think needs to be kept, what was cut that should not have been cut, what you think should be cut that's still sitting there. Those types of things. So it's a good conversation. It's a good discussion to have before we do things. When we have the lead. Excellent. All right. I know that Al and Brian wanted to stay with police. You had police last year?
Police and fire.
Police and fire?
Both department heads asked for us to stay just for continuity.
Fine with that. Were those the only two that you guys had?
Well, they're big ones.
All right.
I mean, I'll take some others if you need.
We'll see. And that would include dispatch too, also,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah.
Okay. We have Board of Health, EHS, Veterans, Library, Park and Rec. Alicia has requested you for Park and Rec. Would you like Park and Rec?
Whatever.
And we do tag team, so if anybody wants to
Yeah,
join in.
it's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind sitting with Alicia again. I had her last year as well, so I think me and Tom met with her last year.
Okay.
Darla.
I'd be happy to do library. I used to do that back in the day.
Highway. I don't mind doing highway.
Highway. DPW. Where's DPW? Jerry, who did you take
I
last
do light
year?
and water, although, I mean, which I'd like to stay with because, well, they appointed me, but it's also been a huge investment in attending their meetings to learn over the past couple of years. But I don't really feel like I do a lot, as far as the budget goes, because they always do it themselves, for the most part, because it's, it's a little more complicated and how they're separate, so I'd be happy to do something else. I mean, I had historical, and I forget one other very small ones that didn't really have, it didn't really take a whole lot of effort and time.
I think this year, Light and Water might be more interesting.
Well, yeah, it's definitely.
Water department and the
There's definitely a
sewer
lot
department.
to it, but they usually end up coming in and, multiple times and going over things better. I mean, I certainly, I attend and I learn and I can offer things, but, I don't know, I just
Having a
feel like
knowledgeable...
the way it's separated,
How about this, which department would you like to learn more about? How's that?
well, I don't want to
That way.
learn at the same investment time as I did with Light and Water, because that was a
No.
big
It's basically
commitment,
just,
but,
just calling up the department head.
yeah,
and
but
making
anything
an
else is fine.
How's EHS? Would you like EHS?
Yeah, that's fine.
Anybody else want to tag team on EHS?
Could I?
Absolutely.
That'd be great.
And Jenna, you mentioned you wanted library also?
I think Brian mentioned the library,
Yeah.
if he's willing
Tag
to.
team.
Oh, it
You can
doesn't-
do two.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I suspect that I have a lot to learn, and so being with someone would be helpful to better understand how you all handle
Sure.
what you all do.
Anybody want to do highway with Fred?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind tag teaming that. I want to do the schools again too.
You do want to do schools?
Yeah.
I think I'd like to do schools also, so.
Does this mean, Tyler, you're not looking for, to
No,
be?
no, I still have. I mean, they haven't found a replacement, but I still,
Okay.
I'm assuming, I'll.
Okay.
So we have building department, planning, conservation, health, veterans. And it's basically all the people that are over in the old library now.
I'm happy to take what you all don't want. Give me one of those. Now you have to admit that out loud.
It's
Sorry,
on camera, too.
that's an awkward position. to put you in. I'll take whatever other ones you'd like to assign me.
Well, and Alvin's not here too, so we can give him all the leftover.
Exactly.
Oh, that's right. There's another person.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tom last year had veterans. So
I like
maybe
veterans.
You
Yeah,
like
yeah,
veterans?
veterans are
So
nice.
Jenna, you can do
Yeah.
veterans also. And Tom had cemetery. Anybody want to do cemetery? That's kind of a fit with DPW if you want to,
Sure.
Fred and Tyler.
Yep.
And then Tyler, you had the building people last year. Building, planning, conservation. Or is that piling on too much here?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't get a chance to meet last year, but I'm happy to tag team that with someone. It probably makes sense to have someone else involved too, but if they're...
Do you want to tag team with Tyler on that? Jerry?
Yep, building and conservation?
The health, building, conservation, planning. They're all
Oh, okay, yeah,
basically the same people.
all right.
Yeah.
So you're taking assessors with finance?
Yeah, so I'll take
Okay.
accounting, assessors, treasurer, tax collector,
Okay.
town admin,
Okay.
Infosys, HR.
Do you need anyone to tag team with you, Steve? Seems like those are a lot of.
Yeah, I've
Who's
worked
doing
with
the
those people,
schools?
so I'm fine.
Who's doing schools?
Tyler and I.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. What about the absent Mr. Rasmus here too? Don't forget him.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, he's with me on police and fire.
Oh, right.
And he could tag team on, let's see. Tyler, it seems like you've got a lot too.
Yeah,
Get
I mean...
some off to.
Yeah, I mean, if how about how about have him do like the building type stuff with Jerry maybe?
Done.
Wonderful.
Sorry, Al.
It's okay.
All right, I'll send that list around before we get into that. Okay.
So you'll,
Just a-
so you'll send the list around?
I'll type it up and send it around.
And what's the timeline?
I'll get the department heads. The budget memos haven't gone out to the departments yet. It's usually, departments probably due back sometime at the end of October with their budgets to Ryan. So it'll be sometime after that we'd be sitting down with the departments.
Okay, so we do budget
End of
Halloween.
October,
Halloween,
first part of
just for,
November, right around town meeting, so.
Yeah.
All right?
So between now and the end of October, we should be meeting with the
No, they
department?
haven't, they're not gonna have their budgets done until
Oh.
end of October.
Okay, so
So it's
I shouldn't be coordinating with Brian to go talk to Sam tomorrow?
No, okay.
October.
October, all right. Got it.
Hey, we'll get a copy of the budget memo that goes around, so you'll have a better idea of when things need to be done. All right. Last week, we heard from CPC and from the Affordable Housing Trust, and we heard CPC's request to increase the percentage from 1 to at least 2, hopefully 3%. And Carolyn, you can chime in whenever you'd like.
Okay.
Okay. So kind of a debrief from that meeting. What's everybody's initial thought process since we had a week to think about this now? And have we come up with some alternatives that you'd like to discuss? I'll open it up.
I still think just as sort of a starting position that aside from when we occasionally find money to move to some of the capital projects, we know that we have a crazy amount of capital projects coming down the pike. And we know that at least some of those are not going to be able to be inside the levy. So it's just, sticker shock for people's taxes. It's I mean, like replacing shaker. It's not really optional, So that's just for my starting position of like, I need to be convinced. Granted, the match and all that, but it's a tough starting spot.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of struggling a bit with the same thing, right? I mean, I think that, 100%, know that we funded a lot of projects out of CPC in the past and know that the match is great and free money, but as we're sitting here every year making decisions on what not to fund, not having that targeted towards concrete things is where I'm, I think, mentally derailing a little bit, right? Knowing that we didn't fund Indian Hill and we have to, Shaker Lane coming in. I would feel better if we had the 10-year capital plan, like we talked about, with just overlays of, okay, here's how this additional funding would retire a lot of other things that, and then we can better track towards, okay, we can fund less in the capital plan or for stabilization, whatever, to pull out those buckets. And I know a lot of those projects are eligible, but I can't say, on a spreadsheet, okay, $1.7 million in fiscal 25, is planned as a priority. So I think where I'm just not having that concrete data is where I'm struggling a little bit with making a financial recommendation on it versus a political or direction or will of the town type decision, which I think those are the two different, the select board views things through that, will of the town, will of the voter thing, and I just don't have enough data to make a financial decision yet, I don't think.
Jerry, any thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I don't want to see the match, I want to be able to maximize the match, but I feel like part of the select board's priority is to be able to fund these big long-term, or these big ticket items of like, open space purchases, which is great, but to me, if we're going to be increasing it, and whether it be through the property tax, or whether it be through the town or partial, I would want to be able to fund some capital projects with that if we're putting aside money in toward it more. And I know that can be done because there's certain things that it's eligible for, but I just feel like the priority of wanting to build up the fund is just for those bigger things, and then it's not gonna get used, so we're still gonna have the same capital projects that we're gonna need to fund out of the town's budget. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
I think that's a good point, and I think I went back and looked at the financial policy, and with the CPA addendum that was done in 17 or 18, whatever it was, 2017, 2018, it basically created a mechanism which called blended funds, right? And for a couple of years, we were taking advantage of that. Sort of one-time money comes in rather than just let it flow into the budget or use it for capital projects, would flow it through CPC, get the match and whatnot. And we haven't done that in the last couple of years. I've only been back 1 year, but I went back and looked the last couple of years anyway. We haven't done that. So we haven't even taken advantage of the financing that's in the town policies. So before we consider increasing the taxes, I think we should look at what can we do within the policy that we have if there's money that comes in, if there's, what affectionately called one-time money, should we be running that through CPC, and then it gets split out, however the committee thinks it should be.
Right, because we always said, you used to call them bluebirds, I remember.
Yeah, right, yeah.
That, one-time money always went to one-time expenses, and if we can funnel it so it gets a match, awesome. I mean, the other thing, just looking at my own notes from the last meeting, we had talked about, we have as a matter of policy that every year a certain amount needs to go into each of the various stabilization fund buckets. Mm-hmm. And we had talked about, could we, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but could we shave, we had talked last week about could we shave those a little bit and just say, as a matter of policy, we put, take 0.5% from each of the other stabilization funds that we transfer and put that into, increasing the CPA fund, just so we could get it without having a tax raise. And I think that feels more doing what we want without increasing the burden. I'm not sure the numbers accomplish everything we need to, but I think it raises some money and lets us still say to the town, we're really trying to keep your taxes from increasing fast.
Mm-hmm. Were you able to watch last week's meeting?
I read Marilyn's notes, and she said that it's pretty much verbatim, because she's so quick with her note-taking.
Any thoughts about?
I think that, much like funding a 401k, if your employer says to match it, it seems silly not to leave, to leave the money there, but at the same time, it's money that the taxpayers don't have in their own hands. So I like the idea of matching. I like the idea of funding things that improve the quality of our town, and people hate taxes. So if we're able to, as you're suggesting, to take money and put it into the CPA so that it can be matched without increasing the tax burden, yeah, that would be the dream. I don't know how much can be reaped in that method, but it varies from year to year, is a sense that I get, depending on all sorts of factors.
It would. So the policy that was written back in 15, 16, I think it was.
Yeah.
Actually has, if you follow the free cash section of
Right.
the financial policy, it refers to the two pieces where you can take funds from.
Right.
And those funds are from the capital sections. So it's basically in there saying, so whatever we come up with capital, it's just another, like capital stabilization or the capital articles, you put some of this capital dollars into CPC.
Mhm.
I don't think there's, free cash varies from year to year. Our capital projects vary from year to year. So I don't think there's any kind of guarantee that we could make that it's going to be an extra 400,000 to make up that 2% or higher. But we could certainly do something each year. And we've been negligent in doing that the past couple of years, probably since Keith left.
So with that,
That it hasn't been done.
so it kind of, so say we were gonna, as we're getting to next year's budget cycle, start to kind of plan for that. It would be kind of a lagging funding source, right? So like for next year, if we weren't funding our typical capital plan, we'd be funding CPC instead, and that money could be used in the subsequent fiscal, right? So that would kind of put a year delay on that initial funding year and on our ability to use that money, or?
Not necessarily if the
We do it at the fall?
article that put it in there is before.
Before,
the
okay.
CPC,
Yeah, no, you're right.
it's
Okay.
in and
All right.
You take it right out.
And you could
So
still
it
do
could
the
be
one,
the same one.
the one-off income in addition to that, as if they came into, if you weren't maximizing it, right? I mean, you didn't, that was being done before, one-time monies that were
Well-
going into that when they came
Yeah,
in.
and
could
that's
still
another
go
thing
in
that-
addition.
We need to get the different committees on board, because before, say, let's take the planning board, for example. Planning board has an HCA that they're coming to an agreement with the builder. Those funds were directed directly into the CPC. All of a sudden, those are being directed into the Affordable Housing Trust directly. And I think that practice needs to stop, and it needs to funnel into there.
Right.
And in my mind, and this is something that the selectmen would have to be on board with, in my mind, it's the CPC then becomes the gatekeeper for the Affordable Housing Trust. You request a budget from them each year and not just give them 100%, saying, what do you need this year to fund your things? What's your balance? How are you going to spend that? So you keep control of the funds in that housing bucket. That way, if it's needed somewhere else, then it could be moved.
Yeah.
They
Gives
don't
more
have-
options than just the.
Because I was very surprised with $1 million sitting in that Affordable Housing Trust that the
Well,
town has
Yeah,
control over.
I was surprised. I mean, it was definitely eye-opening. I mean, last time too, like I guess I always assumed, for example, with like the, with the affordable housing stuff that comes with development, I always assumed that was, the developer providing that house, right? And that unit. I had no idea that varied so wildly, and that some of these things are just, okay, there's some land put aside and that's a town expense, right? I would have never dreamed that was a town expense to build an affordable house that a developer agreed to give to build a development, right? I mean, that was a shocker for me. So I think consistency in that is really important,
and I
right?
think the one in, like, again, just hearing from those two committees up front, I didn't really hear a plan, either board. These are the things that we want to be able to do. We need this amount of funds, especially from the Affordable Housing Trust. We've heard a couple of projects that are ongoing, but it didn't wind up taking $1 million worth of funding to do what they were talking about. And it's good to have money in reserve, absolutely. Everybody needs money in reserve for things that pop up, but it seems like there's a lot of funds there that they could use for the next few years. And get
Well, and if that money's in reserve in the CPC,
And the
it can be
CPC
used in
holds
more
it.
areas versus their money
Exactly.
can only be used for their.
Exactly.
I feel like we need to go through another round of policy writing. So, like 8 years ago or whatever it was, we had a dearth of policies. We wrote a bunch of policies, got all kinds of benefits from them, and now it's like at town meeting, no one ever asks, "Oh, should we put this into the cap stabilization fund?" Because it's just what we do. It's just what we do. And I think I'd love to see us go back to writing some more policies, so these sort of things aren't things that we might do, forget to do. They're just things that we do automatically. And I think that makes it, granted, free cash goes up and down, but it's a more at a certain level, it is a stable funding source.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think we need to get select board, they have to be on board with that.
Right. Or Brian, maybe even formalizing, or every other year, every year we review half the policies or something, just even something to keep them relevant and top of mind, etc. Right?
We used to do
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we now review the policies every 20 years or so. It's like, no.
Any other discussion? Sounds like the consensus I hear is that we don't want the tax increase. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would phrase it as, I think we believe, and we could be wrong, that we can accomplish the goal without the tax increase.
And in lieu of that, can we say that Plan B is the tax increase? Like, we're going to try to do it this way, and if that doesn't work, we guarantee that we'll go to 2%? I mean, can you have two plans at once?
Could probably
So
have
I've heard nothing from you guys that indicates to me that you can find the roughly $1 million between 1% and 3%. I mean,
that there is no way that we can get to 3%.
okay, so
Outside of increasing taxes, there's no way that we can get to 3%.
and I feel like that was the goal that the select board set out, was we want to be at 3% on a regular and consistent basis. And we're not getting there without increasing taxes. I agree with you.
And in my mind last week, I did not hear any kind of plan to spend those dollars.
And, well, okay, the other thing I will point out is that assuming that we can spend, and a lot of these are, the big ones are things that are open space, that we know that there are open space parcels out there that we're going to want to buy in the future. We don't know which ones they are or which ones are going to come available first, so it's not like we can say, oh, the one that we know is up right now. But that will probably take a healthy chunk out of the open space budget. We know that the tennis court project is going to take the vast majority of the existing funds for active recreation. There are other, we would like to, the Park and Rec Department anyway, would like to develop some of the park space we have, but the last time we looked at that, it would have wiped out the entire CPC fund if we had gone forward with that. So there's certainly places that we've looked at and decided not to do because we felt like there wasn't enough funding available there.
Yeah.
The other thing, just the last point I'll make is, if we can spend the money, if we can find the appropriate places that we want to spend for things that the town needs and wants to do, the CPC surcharge is more progressive and easier for seniors to get out of than the flat tax rate. If you can move the money from one place to the other, you could lower the tax rate if you really wanted to, if you felt like there was too much money coming into the town.
All good points. I just wanted, I thought I heard last week that the number of seniors who were opting out was like less than 10?
It is tiny, and it is,
It will be more.
I mean, I assume it will be more because we've talked about it a bunch and we'll continue to talk about it a bunch. I think it probably should be more. I think but the eligibility is quite high. I don't know what the exact number of people who would be eligible, but it's not insignificant. And I don't know if it's a lack of awareness or a lack of desire, or it's just a hassle. I'm not sure what the roadblock is. Or if it's, I know I have talked to people who probably are eligible, and they said, no, I'm happy with it, it's fine.
Okay.
So when I say that there's not a plan, I know you can't plan for open space because they come up at different times. But basically, any other one of those buckets is a project or something that would start through the capital process, start with the selectmen, and go to your committee for review and approval. And given that, those types of projects should be on the town's capital, we have a 10-year capital plan. And I believe Ryan went through it, or he had somebody go through it last week. There wasn't much in that 10-year capital plan that was CPC eligible. Now, maybe the capital plan's not getting the right things, like new fields for Park and Rec, and so maybe they're not on there. There's really nothing else. The pool that they want is
Right.
probably there.
Right. Well, even
There's nothing really else there eligible for CPC funding.
I think it's easier to plan for a goal. Like if there was a state, if there was a goal for the town of, acquiring, the average of $500,000 a year in open space, that's something you can plan for, right? You can come up with a funding source to fund $500,000 worth of money for whatever, right? But it's just, the more is better is the part I struggle with.
And that's
right?
the thing that we've done is when something's coming down the road, we know that's going to happen, we put money aside for it. We knew we needed the senior center over a 2 or 3 year period. We built a stabilization fund with $5 million in it that we were able to use for that project. So if there was a plan and we identified something to say, something's coming down the road, it's going to be good for the CPC to handle this, let's funnel that money into the CPC to make this thing work. But just to take some capital funds for a capital plan that's pretty loaded and put it to there on the off chance that we have something that we need to do, I have a hard time in tying up the capital. It's great that we get the match, but I heard a couple of times last week that the match is single digits this year.
No, I haven't heard that.
Somebody said it twice, that the meeting last week.
Yeah, I don't think that's accurate.
No, I think they were saying maybe a floor of 20, but they were hoping to get more. I
Okay,
think, no, I haven't heard you.
okay.
Yeah, I didn't hear that either. I do have a question, just that I think the fields are a really interesting one for us to play with, because I think we know we need more fields. I mean, we've got an article to put lights on a field that didn't have lights before because we're trying to increase use, knowing that will, mean that field needs to be rested sooner than later. But anyway, but so, I mean, is there a project, a plan for doing a field?
There is they're in the Park and Rec 10-year plan. Fields are in there. The challenge is where. Right now, we don't have a piece of property that we could put a field. I mean, other than Cooper, which, while is not ideal, probably could still serve as a field that would take some load off some of the stuff. But again, that Cooper, if you're going to make it a field, is probably back to, it's another $1 million project because you have to develop the infrastructure to go with it. So if we're ever going to do anything with that property, it's going to be a significant investment.
Okay, but I think that would be actually a really reasonable, investment, and so I can see that. I can see us looking at that and saying yes, yes, let's do that. I think one of the things that also struck me from last week is that we talked about sort of the disconnect debate between CPC's project planning and the capital planning, and we had said, wow, we all agree we want to do better, we want to integrate them more, but we haven't yet. So I think, go ahead.
Well, I think that's it. I mean, it's kind of a change of philosophy for CPC, for the CPA funds. And like the recreation is a fairly new category, and before that, when we didn't have recreation, which is really the one that has the most capital, I'm pointing to Sal because he's the rep for it. But we had historic research, open space obviously was where the bulk of the money, that's coming up. But it's, again, you can't really plan for it because it's just gonna, like Jones Meadow, someone was mentioning that we had that we could have bought, and that would have been flat for a field. We could have purchased that. Historic is another kind of, those are mostly one-offs. The Baker House on Robinson Road was one, which, that didn't work out the way we wanted. But having capital projects within CPC is something that's fairly new, I want to say. It's not something that we've ever had come through the CPA until, like I say, recreation. The 300 King Street really started it. That was like the first big projects that they had.
Right.
So I think if there is, the project doesn't start there. It starts with the departments,
Yeah.
going to the selectmen, and then funnels over to there for approval.
And it's the other thing I think is I hope that we could get creative to the degree that it's, permissible and legal and within the bounds of the system. But, for instance, talking about rebuilding Shaker Lane, some part of that, I assume, is going to be recreational facilities on the Shaker Lane property. Can that come out of CPC? I don't see why not. At that point, we're moving, again, we're trying to get these things that fit in CPC that we're going to do anyway. And just
That depends
understand
on
that
the
they're there.
MSBA and how much,
You have to be-
what pieces of the
projects.
project they will cover.
Right.
Because
Right.
they have to approve everything when we deal with MSBA.
Carol, I don't remember, was the Robinson Road House funded through CPC?
Yes, we purchased it.
And my
It's being
understanding,
sold, right?
It's being sold, it will be refunded to CPA.
so you've got some of the money back?
We will recoup that once the purchase and sale is executed, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so again, that's money coming back, which be
The
a
historic
couple
bucket.
100,000 or whatever it is, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So that's looked at as part of an extra deposit into the fund. So you have your 400,000 for
No,
1%?
it's a reimbursement, so we can't use
You can't?
the blended funds. No,
Okay.
because it's being reimbursed.
Reimbursed back. But the 200,000 from the light department was?
Was, yes, because that was a gift.
Okay. That's what's going to be used to fund the lights, correct?
Yes, that.
They're
but
talking
that-
about that across the street right now.
Yeah, I mean, that was earmarked for recreation. The donor requested it to be earmarked for a recreation project. It went to Light and Water. Light and Water really gave the money, so we have a memorandum of understanding that they can dictate where that money, what project that money goes to.
And has Park and Rec talked to the light department about using those funds for this project?
I believe they have, but it's ongoing discussions about, it's on their agenda as well, so.
I know Alicia's supposed to be coming later on. So.
Yeah, I think she's
She's-
already scheduled a meeting with Light and Water.
She's talking with the select board right now. But yeah, I'm just looking at the list. There's a 10-year cap plan. There's, I mean, there are, just in the Park and Rec bunch, there are quite a few, I think, that would fall under CPC. Probably, I don't know that we want to do all of them. I don't know that, we would get support for all of them, but there's probably, I mean, not including the community center with pool, 10 to 12 million over the next 10 years, so.
So that's the type of thing, I think that process, that whole capital process needs to really have some teeth to it. And maybe it's just too early to go ahead until that process is straightened out. And then we integrate the free cash calculation with CPC and see what we can get out of it each year. As long as it's on top of people's minds, I think we should be able to do something.
Yeah.
And like Jenna said, the next step, if this fails, the next step would be maybe you go to 2% on the rate.
Yeah. Well, I think.
But if, excuse me, if we're going to do that, I would recommend that we try to commit to do something in the 25 budget. So
Absolutely.
that means going into the budget discussions, we need the selectmen on board that we're going to come up with the money from somewhere. And coming up with the money, it's not going, it's going here, it's not going there, because we don't have extra money just laying around. So I think we need to, in the next month or so, wrestle to the ground what mechanism we can get the select board on board with us to do this for this next budget cycle. So CPC gets some of the budget benefit in this next budget cycle,
With some blended
rather than let it slip another year. Right?
Yeah, and Fred, like that's part of what, like as I'm trying to think about process to get there, right? Like, you know, we're starved for data, Frank, right? And I have the town accountant and stuff. Like, we're usually going into the budget process, you know, at least some information around, okay, here's estimates on new growth, here's, you know, I mean, we're starting to have at least some rough discussions around what we think the financial books look like. And we just, you know, we just having those conversations that we think it's just that much harder to plan, to know where we're at, right? Even at the start of it.
Unfortunately, I think of the capital process that we go through each year. It's kind of like what we had with the, you know, overall finances of the town, 15 years ago, where we just looked at this year. Oh, we're okay with this year, and we don't look at the implications going forward. We stopped doing that in the finances years ago. We need to stop doing that for capital. We have a 10-year plan that we asked departments to do. We still focus on this year, push things out a couple of years, but we're not putting a plan in place to fund those items.
Yeah. Well,
Except we throw money into capital stabilization to have it there, but without a plan to spend it. That's the thing.
yeah, I think some of that is lack of data, though, too, right? I mean, like we you know, 2 years ago, the 10-year cap plan got redone kind of from scratch, right? We at least had that, but it was late. It was late in the budget cycle we got that, and then last year it didn't really get, at least didn't. If it got updated, it didn't get distributed. So we never really had that 10-year document pushed out a year, but we could really start to plan around, right? We were, you know, but everything was different last year, right? I mean, the kind of admin budget and everything, right?
And that's the thing. If we develop that plan and really have something in place for it, we can actually start looking at the capital stabilization bucket and saying, do we really need all that money there? Is some of that stabilization
Right.
funds that's already been voted
Right.
being able to transfer over to there?
Right. Turn into a plan versus a 10-year wish list, right?
Right. I mean, just like we're asking them to do, we should take that responsibility too, as far as doing a capital plan.
Right. I mean, when we put money into cap stabilization, we're saying we're saving because we know we're going to spend it. But we could just as easily, go right back to, slice some of that off and say we're saving it through the way we get the match.
We're saving it to get a match in CPC because we have this field that we know that we need to do. We're going to do this field within the next 3 years, and it's going to cost X. Well, we have 3 years to get X into the CPC.
Right, right. So I think we should have a goal that we, as you say, talk with the select board, you know, over the next month and say, look, our intention, if it is to, you know, shave these percentages. So, you know, do we get $1 million? No, but maybe we get, you know, 400,000, and that's something. That's more than zero. You know, and that's a starting point. And then, as we get more comfortable with this integrated capital plan, then we're in a position where we have the more data and we're like, okay, let's do some more. But it's something.
Can I make a suggestion? So every single public school student in all of the Commonwealth gets breakfast and lunch because the state taxed millionaires. I'm sure we have millionaires in Littleton. Could we consider taxing millionaires?
I don't think it's within the town's
Yeah.
style to do that.
Why not? The state can, but the town can't? Why?
I don't believe that's a possibility, but we'd like to do some research on it right ahead.
It surprised me that we as a state could do it.
That's an income tax.
Yeah,
We don't have income tax.
Property tax.
okay.
But
Could
even
we?
like the meals tax,
No.
the other taxes, the state does say what the max is that we can do, so they do, set up a structure for those. I
Right.
don't know what it is, if
We
there is
have
anything for
property
that,
taxes,
but,
excise taxes.
yeah.
Hotel tax.
Yeah, and so New
meals
York,
tax.
New York City also asks, or rather taxes, anyone who sells a property over $1 million, there's a 1% fee that goes back to the city of New York. Perhaps we could start telling people when they sell their $1 million homes, they can leave $10,000 to Littleton for all the things that CPC has done over the years to enhance the town, to increase property value. Because people who bought houses, I know someone personally, she bought her house just a few years ago and sold it for a lot more than what she bought it for because Littleton's a nice town. So it seems to me that people whose property values have gone up considerably, maybe we're not taxing people as they live here, but on your way out, you can leave something behind. And if people stop building $1 million homes that cost a lot of money to heat and insulate and cool, then that's okay too. We can live in smaller homes. What do you think, huh?
Just to point out to Fred's point about asking the select board to get on board, I think their suggestion, at least I don't want to speak for them, but what I heard last week was raise it to 2%, and that gets you halfway there, halfway from where we are now. I mean, not, I understand you're resistant to the raising taxes, but you keep going around to we can find it, we can work with the select board to do something different, but that,
Just raise
When-
taxes
when
on
they-
rich people.
when they talked about it, it was, the direction that I think that they wanted to go, or at least they were okay voting on, saying this is where we're headed, is to raise it to 2%.
Well, that's the joy of having these two boards that sometimes disagree.
That's fine, but I guess I don't know, when you go back to them, are they going to say, oh, yeah, no, we didn't really mean that, let's,
Well, no, it's, I
let's
think,
not get to the 3%.
I think it's a negotiation. We say, you've offered to go to 3%, and our reply might be this.
Personally, I think before we ask the citizens to pay more in taxes, the burden should be on us to see if we can rework how we do things to find the funds that we should be putting in there before we just say, well, give us more.
And see, I think us
I have problems with that.
I think us finding the funds is a very different budget process than last year too, right? I mean, last year was a very different process for us with kind of having an almost final budget presented to Fincom versus at least some semblance of hearing and being those conversations around prioritization, right? So I think if we're gonna commit to trying to find that money again, it's going to be a change in budget process with interim town admin and everyone else too to make some decisions around where the bucket's coming
It's
from,
more
right?
the planning piece
Yeah,
that we
right.
have
But it had
to
to come
get in.
pretty quick in the budget process for us at the end.
Instead of just taking the capital plan and shoving it in the back of the book and looking at 1 year, we really need to plan. And that's all. I'd rather go through that process, see what we can do out of it. Certainly can't guarantee 2 or 3% each year, but we can do something. And I know I heard 2 or 3 of the select people say that last week, that they wanted 3%, but I think there'd be a discussion with that board also.
Come this one to death.
Yeah. Anything else with this?
To be continued.
I'm sure we'll be meeting with the select board before the warrant, well, maybe not when the warrant closes, but before it goes to print, which is the end of this month.
Can I just ask you a question? Are you allowed to, like, if you purchased a land for open space, can you then turn it into recreation and still use the same funds with that, or is that now just an open space?
If you purchase open space, I think you have to put a conservation restriction on it. But you can buy land to use for recreation.
But that would come from your recreation fund.
Yeah, we can move money from one fund to another.
Right. Well-
Within limits.
But you have to decide which it was going to be before it was purchased. You couldn't buy open space and then reclassify it to recreation to put in a field afterwards. I guess that's the thing we were getting to.
So,
And if you had land that was already conservation, that's restricted, that you can't then use it for recreation.
Without changing the
certain
restriction,
types.
which is difficult. I mean, it's not an easy process, but we could find out about that specifically.
Okay, to be continued, I guess?
Yep.
Okay. Before Alicia gets here, we can send around the link, I guess, to the possible warrant articles that the selectmen will be adding tonight at their meeting. I don't know what their discussion will be, but this is the list that they're seeing and going through. I did help Ryan put this list together in my working days here, so I can certainly talk to them. And I asked Ryan to come to our meeting. We'll probably have to meet next Tuesday, because town meeting will be here before we know it. Warrant closes on the 15th and goes to print on the 28th, I believe, so we could squeeze in possible 2 meetings or so. I'm pretty sure one of them is going to have to be joint with the select board at some point, just to hash these things out. Did everybody get a chance to look at this list here? So I'll just quickly go through it. I can answer questions as we go along. So the first financial one is add a school resource officer for the police department, wages and salary. I don't have a number to that. In talking to the select board, Fred and I met with the chair and vice chair this past week. School's requesting another school resource officer. Police department would like to get another resource officer in there. There was some discussion as to whether this was pushed out from, it was requested in this year's budget, just pushed out. I don't recall that happening, but they both did.
Would this be at the middle school?
This is just a second officer to cover the school system.
That floating?
Yeah. I think that's what Officer Wazinski does now, is float between schools. So that's that. Electronic voting, that's something that's been talked about for a while. I know Anthony brought that up when his time in where he was before he came back here. They were using that. I don't have a dollar number for it, but it's something that the town meeting, if I recall correctly, town meeting pushed it off to this town meeting to come up with some numbers at last town meeting.
Right, yeah, we agreed to look into it,
That's
right?
what this is. Park and Rec revolving fund, raising their expenditure limit from 1.1 million to 1.3 million. That's something that Alicia had requested of Alicia when she was here, but it didn't get reflected in that budget in the warrant article that talks about the spending, so they're going to do that. Authorize the town to raise an appropriate transfer of available funds 82,251.51 to the SOAR enterprise operating budget to fund the town's SOAR betterment accession assessment. That is our estimated assessment. The letters went out to the affected residents, I believe, last week, collecting 10% of the project right now as an estimated betterment, and the remainder of the project will be billed upon completion of the project. Looks like the town's full assessment would be somewhere just shy of $900,000. Round about.
Thank you.
But we need to pay the $82,000 this year. Transfer $4.4 million from the overlay reserve to cap stabilization. Last year, the selectmen voted to take a TIF away from one of the businesses in town. They weren't performing to the TIF. And everything that we had given them a tax break on was now new growth to the town because we hadn't taxed it since then. And it provided quite a bit of funds to the town, which went into the overlay reserve. Ryan had asked our chief assessor how much she needed in the overlay account. She came up with a number, and we're transferring the excess balance out. And this money, a good use of this money, if it's going into capital stabilization, would be to fund the improvements at Indian Hill. And that should be coming through for the Maytown meeting.
Just as an example, could we flow that through and get the match?
It's not eligible.
Okay.
Renovations aren't eligible.
The project isn't eligible. That's the-
All right, I
You
tried.
could float through and get the match for something else.
Oh, okay, all right.
So that's what those funds will be used for. That's what they should be earmarked for. So that's part of our plan.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough.
The senior center stabilization fund, when the town voted to move $5 million from the stabilization fund into the project, the actual balance was $5 million to something. Now we're moving out that to something into the project itself, plus interest.
Steve, you can tell me to ask this later, but going back to the previous one, as we're taking over any money for the Indian Hill renovation, are, maybe I asked this last week, so we do have a plan for getting the numbers for the renovation
That is
down the road?
2 more articles.
Okay,
One more article.
Fair enough, yeah.
So that's that. So it's be the 200,000 going into the project, which means we can borrow $200,000 less when it comes time for the senior center. Transfer money from cap stabilization for the owner's project manager and architectural support for the renovation of 36 King Street. So this is coming up with bids in hand, so we can go back to town meeting for the renovation of that project. We can actually see what it's going to cost, and I think Vertex has been hired as the OPM for that.
So, Steve, I guess, how's that different than the process we went through at the last special, right? I mean, we had, at the regular town meeting, we had a pretty detailed budget
Basically the
from-
same thing, only they're going to go out to bid.
But are they,
Formalize things.
Okay.
This was just, what we had for May was just an estimate.
well, right, but I mean, that estimate was way more than we as a board wanted to support, and we haven't seen anything that we're driving towards, a lesser number, like, so has there been,
We'll kind of go back to the drawing board
Yeah.
to see what really needed to be done, and
Right, and that's
that's what this is.
what they'll be doing. Working with the architect, I forget the architectural firm,
but,
LLB or
yeah, J, yeah, but I mean, like, before they got to bid, I mean, is there gonna be like the process, like, there was whatever, like $200,000 sliding wall or whatever, there was just a lot of questions that no one knew what
Sure, we'll
stuff
get
was,
many
right?
details before May.
Before it
I'll
goes to
make
bid.
sure that Ryan fills us in as to what's going on. He'll be working with the two, with the OPM and the architect.
Or else I'll just say no again.
It's still going to be, no matter what we do, it's going to be pricey, so.
Yeah.
Amend language for the senior center borrowing that we did. So we've done 2 borrowing authorizations for the senior center. The first one was done for design only. The second one was design and construction. We have design funds left over, so the language will change to allow that to be also construction. Number 12 here is the purchase of the Webster property. Select Board will be giving us, and Ryan will be giving us more information on that one next week when he comes in. This will be done through the CPC. There's a borrowing authorization that we did back in 2020 for an ambulance, and we're going to be rescinding that borrowing authorization since we didn't purchase the ambulance. The next one will be a purchase of an ambulance through the ambulance receipts, and unfortunately they can't fund the entire thing. So if you remember in last year's budget process, the fire department came in and said they needed an ambulance, but it was a 2-year lead time.
Right.
And we said, yes, well, we need the funds, we have them. I think Anthony may have still been here, put money into the capital stabilization fund for it. Now we're just going to take out 175,000 of those funds. I think it was like 600,000 that went in.
Yeah.
We're going to take 175 out and 250 from the ambulance fund because now they went to a different vendor. They can take receipt of the ambulance a lot sooner than.
Great.
Hey, Steve, do you know if the select board's ever revisited the topic of, like, you know, the unpaid receivables for ambulance service? Right? I know that's something we talked about last time we were going through funding, right? Just how much money hadn't
I
been.
think the fire chief is hiring somebody or in the process of hiring somebody to do collections for that.
Okay, great.
Department of Public Works transfer $40,000 to fund the purchase of a mower. We'll hear more about that and why they need it right away, but they'll be purchasing that. And number 19 here is a request for $200,000 for lights and $734,000 for tennis courts. And we have Alicia Day here from the Park and Rec Department.
Hello, everybody. How you doing? It's good to see some good old faces. I love it. All right. So let's go ahead. I guess we'll talk about the lights first. So just to kind of give you a rundown of this project, this is something we've been thinking about for a while, back since fall of the previous year. We've definitely decreased a lot of the athletic fields in town. There's a lot of many different reasons for that. Part of the sewer coming online and having to dig up the high school, that's taken off some. We no longer have a lease agreement, sadly, with St. Anne's. So that takes out quite a few fields from us. And
Excuse me, Alicia, why don't we have a lease agreement with St. Anne's? Is that?
Glad you asked. So in the last few years, so the exchange has always been, we would take care, Highway would do the maintenance of the church fields and be able to seed, loam, take care of the fields. And that was always the agreement, is that the highway would do that, and then we would be able to use it for, they have a nice field space in the back. So the last couple of years, they've been asking for more and more. So this past year, they asked for the town to seal coat their parking lot, and we said, we will not be doing that, and they said, you will not be using our fields. So that is.
So that was a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are always open to continue the conversation, but with the agreement
That's
being
fine.
that we will maintain the grass.
No, that's
So, yeah. So, you know, we kind of had this discussion over with the select board as well. So, a lot of the field space that we have in town is not necessarily owned by the town outright, right? It's part of the school property, or it's part of LELWD, or it's these private spaces. So it is something that, we do have to be cautious of and know that there's things that we can do to kind of protect ourselves to be able to still have that space. So this concept of being able to light Kerper Field was one of the things that we had talked about. It's definitely a field that we use quite a bit. The lights that we would be able to use there would allow us to operate the same as we would during the summer season. So we wouldn't be looking at like extending crazy hours or anything, but just a normal from like 8 a.m. to like 9 p.m. And that would give us a good amount of extra time to be able to schedule those fields that will assist us as we go into the next fall and spring season. So this fall season, obviously, we're not going to have them implemented by then. So spring is really the time where it's very challenging for us to be able to schedule the fields. There's a lot of sports, and the numbers just keep increasing. When I first started in 2015, I think soccer had like a 400 cap minimum, or maximum, and they're well exceeding 600 kids a season right now. Yes, sir.
Will more hours normally puts more stress on a field?
You are absolutely correct.
Is this, having the lights on, and we stress the field, and you have to shut the field down, so then the lights aren't really doing anything.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you guys thought about the stress issue? I just don't know.
For sure, yeah. So honestly, at this point in time, we don't really have a whole lot of options. It's not something that we would want to do. I think part of the bigger plan, we had always wanted to put lights on that field. But so it's a good reason to be able to do it now. But ultimately, we would like to be able to spread out that usage more than what we have, but we have what we have. We can't, make more land happen overnight. So, yeah, I totally agree with you on that 100%. So it's not the solution, it's a solution to get us to where we need to go. Yeah. So let's see, what other things here? There are some other votes and things that we're waiting on. Light and water, although I guess I got yelled at over there. It's light or water? That's news to me. I don't know. So whatever the commission is over there, I'll have to find the exact terminology. But they have this on their agenda for the 26th to take an official vote if they're accepting of this happening on their property. We've already had quite a few conversations with Nick over at Light.
Or water.
Or water. No, sorry. So that one of the contributions that they had wanted to do was to be able to dig the trenches so that we can put the conduit in. So at this point, we would need to be able to hire an electrician to be able to lay the conduit. We're looking at potentially seeing if a crane company could donate time. I don't know if that's something that we can or can't do. You say no? We're looking at it to be able to install the lights themselves. So we're trying to keep this as low cost as we possibly can. So what else do we need
You
here?
have a public hearing, I see, on the 12th.
We do. Thank you, Steve. So we really wanted to be open about this plan with the folks in the community. So on August 16th, we sent out a letter with all of the information and more that I'm giving you guys tonight. There's also a website up that people can go visit on our website to see the projects. And we are having a public hearing for anyone, but specifically for the folks that live in that area, to come and share any thoughts, ideas, concerns that they have. So that will be taking place next Tuesday on September 12th at 7 p.m. at the Police Community Room. There you go. So yeah, that's where we're at right now, and I know. So this project itself has been labeled CPC eligible, but we're still waiting on answers to some of these things. We'll see what happens at the public hearing. Maybe it'll be great and wonderful, and maybe it won't. Who knows? We'll see. The public will tell us.
But I think the fact that you've got the new light technology that's
It's
basically
amazing.
more focused. I think
For sure.
it's much less invasive on neighbors. So
Yeah. But still, people may have concerns. So we definitely want to be able to hear them, and you know, we will have a representative from that field there that will be able to answer technical questions and things like that, because that is not my wheelhouse. So, yeah, so any questions about the lights?
You say CPC funding, and this 200,000 is mysteriously the same as the 200,000 that the light department has donated to the CPC.
Yes.
Is this the same 200,000, and are they voting to support this project, or?
That's what we're asking them to do on the 26th.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
No, it's an excellent use for it.
I
It's
didn't.
just-
Is that what you guys talked about earlier? Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Anything else? No.
How long of a project would it be once you start?
Once we would be able to have all the supplies on site, it's something that, you know, it's very quick to be able to put that up. So, honestly, I think it would take anywhere between, like, I would hate to see it be anything longer than 2 weeks. I can't even imagine that it would be. So, when they've looked at the site, they've chosen locations to put lights that they know would be an easy placement. Because if you've ever been out to Kerper Field, one of the sides that is closer over to the light, and we'll call it highway building, is very undulating, and there's trees. So that was something they wanted to be able to avoid, that side of the field. So they specifically have chosen 4 in the corners that would be flat locations that are pretty easy to install. So, yep. We did a scoreboard out there, and it was a couple hours. So this is a little more complex than, you know, a scoreboard, but I don't think it would take very long at all. Yeah. All right. Next one?
Tennis courts.
Tennis courts, let's go. All right. So, the second project that we have here is we're trying to figure out a solution to be able to keep the facilities, specifically in tennis in town, the same level as they always have been. So, as you know, we have 2 that are here in Town Hall that will be going offline to make space for the senior center. So, I mean, ultimately, I think during the discussions, we had always hoped that this would be sort of a more natural, you know, we would have the new ones built and then that could be built, but we're here. So what we've done is we presented a plan before for Cooper Farm, and that was something that we decided to go back to the drawing board and take a look at the high school tennis courts to see if that would be something that would be a more feasible option. Fiscally responsible too. So we went back, we had a little bit of money left over with our designer for that one, and we did come up with a design that would be able to have 4 courts in a row, that would change the orientation, but with that we would be able to keep more of the parking lot and be able to install less fencing. So obviously fencing, as little fencing as you can get, is going to keep the price down because fencing is really crazy expensive. So with that design, we got an estimate from them, and they estimate the project to be $734,000 for, this would cover the tennis courts itself, so that would be taking out the materials, putting in the new materials, the fencing, fixing the parking lot next to it. The reason that needs to be looked at is there are these islands with trees that are in the parking lot, and that's part of stormwater management, so we would need to be able to remove those, but also figure out how we balance that, right? So in the plan, they actually have they moved the strip of land over closer to where the entrance of the tennis courts would be. So with all of that, we would get to a project that's $734,000. I believe Places believed that they could put there's like a road in there. I'm not 100% sure that we would actually be able to fund that. If it would be possible, that'd be great. But I don't. It's a lot of work to put in a road. Yeah.
What is this road?
Yeah. So in your packet, I think I gave mine to Saul. There should be a picture of. Yes, sir. Thank you. Yep, that's the one. So one of the biggest issues that we had was getting access for the public to be able to use these courts since they are on school property. A lot of times people feel really uncomfortable about using school resources when school's in session. So since this property abuts 36 King Street, which we just purchased, we would be looking at putting in a one-way road, and that road would go from, you would enter into 36 King Street, you would follow that road that would be parallel to the tennis courts, and then exit out on the high school road that brings you to the red light. Yep, so then that way, even entrance and exit for use of 36 King Street, when we get to the use of that building, would be much safer than it currently exists.
So is the 36, the quote Indian Hill, is that one way in?
It's not, so.
Will it be one way in?
That would be the idea if we put that road in, that it would be one way so that it's safe, that everyone can come out to that stoplight, yeah. Yep. Currently, it's kind of like a U shape that you could go go to the parking lot. There is a fire lane, which I think people have used to come around the other side, but still, the egress of it is a little.
If, from my view,
questionable.
And my granddaughter took lessons there for years and years. I mean, getting in and out of there. Getting in is okay.
Right.
Getting out, you take your life in your hands.
Yes.
It's actually better now that there are two lights. You know, there's the lights at the high school and the lights down by the
By King Street.
gas station there. But if there was a way to just make that
Bypass
go
it.
away by going in, and the only way to get out of there is to come out with a light, I think it'd be much safer.
Yeah. Sorry, what questions you have, Brian?
Yeah, it's, I don't know, maybe I'm not a highway engineer, maybe I should stay out of this, but it seems like people could still, I mean, the main thing was you said people were uncomfortable driving into the school property.
Mm-hmm.
Well, rather than build a road, let's do some education. You know.
But
It's ultimately,
it's separate.
so that's one reason to go along with it, but ultimately with us purchasing 36 King Street and knowing that that's going to be a space that we're going to use, we really should think about the safest way to be able to enter and exit that space, and being able to have people come through to the stoplight is honestly going to be the safest bet that we have.
So would you then, if I went into Indian Hill for whatever reason and then wanted to leave, would I then have to leave through the high school?
That's a great question. I don't know. I guess we could make it, yeah.
Well, because That doesn't seem like a great idea.
Why is that?
Well, I think it depends on the time of day, right? Definitely not good during an event or when school's getting out, you know?
That's the
Right.
education piece. We would want to let people, don't come at this like 3 o'clock time frame where you're going to get stuck in a line of senior and junior drivers.
Well, yeah, even without the road, I mean, having access somehow to the courts from Indian Hill, I think makes sense because the high school lot is full during the day. I
It
mean,
is, yeah. And the school is also going to continue to park the buses in that location. That's where they're currently parked. They also, because of the time change, the high school has gone back to, I believe, a 9 a.m. start. They've had to get increased amount of buses, so there will be more buses that will be parked in that parking lot as well. So,
Okay.
yeah.
The parking lot really doesn't decrease that much under this,
It shouldn't very much.
not
With
outwards, but width-wise, it would.
It would, but that would be why we would be looking at getting rid of those islands and being able to redistribute the stormwater management. Yeah.
that lot has so much dead space right now, you know, in between where the buses are and.
Yeah, yeah. So there's space for us to be able to do stuff there for sure. Yeah.
So the budget has the road in it now?
It
just-
does, yeah,
okay.
because that was one of the questions that we had, but I had also reviewed this invoice or estimate quote with Steve Yonley, and the reality is, it just kind of depends on what the material costs are at
Yeah.
the time. Being able to pave roads is something that's really pricey right now.
Yeah, and
So-
there's only like 10 grand in there for it looks like, right? So there's not a ton.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying, yeah. So the main point of being able to do this project is to be able to get the tennis courts in and completed, and to make sure that the parking space will be adequate for what we need and what the school needs. If we're able to do that, that would be great, but we're not going to make the decision to move forward with that if we don't feel like we can afford that.
And where is school administration on this?
Great question. So this will be on their meeting on September 14th. So they will be voting whether they want to support the construction of it. And then CPC, we've also asked if they would be willing to make any sort of monetary contribution to this. Or if they would be interested in looking at turning over the courts to the town of Littleton. So that little section would be parceled off. We would obviously still have them get the first priority because, you know, like you said, their season's so short. So that would be something that, you know, they still would have plenty, they have full access to that. So both of those things will be on their agenda on September 14th. I think.
Excuse me, and
Yeah,
the
Fred.
reason to transfer the property is, what? Is it because of CPC funds versus, why would we want or need the property transferred? I just don't understand.
I think it was more of looking at the long-term maintenance. So who's going to be in charge of
Oh.
doing that?
Right, whoever owns it ought to pick up the maintenance tab.
And that's something that, you know, over here, we've been, you know, maintaining the courts out on Town Hall, so it's just something, I don't know. It was one of those discussion pieces that had been brought to the table.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is that, I mean, where do things stand now in terms of who's going to do the maintenance of it moving forward?
That's a really great question, because I feel like that's something we always talk about and never come up with a final solution, so.
Nobody does maintenance in this town anyway, so it doesn't
That's
matter.
why,
Well,
Crazy.
that's why I'm saying like
revisit the 10-year capital plan, right?
Right.
the suggestion of our department taking over and being responsible for that is something that we definitely, we can figure out financially how we would do that. We have programs that we can put money aside to be able to continue to do that maintenance. Essentially, courts like these and like the basketball courts, they're things that we have to do and surface about every 5 years. So that's something, we've already got into our budgeting plan as it goes with maintenance.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool, yeah.
Who
good.
maintains the current courts? School
With
department?
yeah. So, yes, I'll just say yes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's have a plan for that.
So so the school committee will be deciding at their next meeting
That's correct,
whether they
the
will give
14th.
you
Yep.
responsibility to maintain it, or they will maintain it?
I certainly hope they will. That is something that I've had an in-depth conversation with Kelly and Steve. We've sent out a letter to Justin McCarthy, and we've had conversations with Justin as well. So I know, that will be part of the discussion. Whether ultimately they'll take a vote on that, I don't know. I'm not in control of that, but
There should at least be some agreement with the school department.
I hear you on that, my friend.
What you're saying is whether they're going to participate in the cost of this, or if they're gonna turn it over to you.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, this needs to be agreed upon one way or the other prior to town meeting.
Right.
And the commissioners want to take on the responsibility to maintain this? Is that something that?
I think that's, I think we voted on that. It makes sense that if, we're going to have all the courts in one place and we're going to run programs there,
Yeah.
it makes as much sense as anything. I think, having, there's definitely a desire for some commitment from the schools in some fashion or another, whether that's, they take on some of the maintenance or, I think that's the open question, is how do you structure that arrangement?
Yeah.
If
'Cause
the arrangement was that they made a financial contribution annually, could that go to the CPC as blended funds?
Well, I think that was one of the things that you had suggested,
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
CCO's like some partner, to have someone who has, we call it skin in the game is what we call it. That's why we asked if,
Right.
is the school department gonna, if they're using the courts, are they going to contribute? And then we were worried, if we're putting $700,000 into it, are they gonna be maintained, and who should maintain that? And that's why the question came
Well,
up.
yeah, I mean,
What I was wondering is if their contribution could be used as blended funds, if it was.
It could be, but those funds could not be used for maintenance.
Yeah, we can't use CPC funds for maintenance.
Oh, okay.
So, but that could, that is an option
Yeah,
to have
yeah.
them, commit money to CPC.
Gotcha.
For something,
Whether-
yeah.
Whether it goes back to, to essentially to pay off the capital part of it or.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Shuffling money around.
Boost the fund up again and start restocking
Right.
the reserve fund. But, that's not.
I would think with this project that, a $700,000 tab basically would wipe out the recreation bucket.
Right.
I would probably suggest borrowing for this over 10 years.
Yep.
You just pay the debt service out of this.
And that was something that
Probably talking
we were
70
all
to
pretty much on board with that.
80
Yeah.
to maybe 85,000 a year.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. That was the game plan.
Good.
Questions? Concerns?
no, it just, what pops to mind is, kind of the school department having a skin in the game. I mean, I think, having a skin in the game on the capital side kind of puts them in the same boat as you, right? Where it would be something that we'd be funding out of capital, with the CPC as a likely, as a candidate for funding, right? Versus,
Right.
getting them to buy into the operational stuff
Yeah.
might be a better thing, just because it would functionally be coming out of a different bucket, right?
Yeah.
These courts are going to have pickleball painted on them.
Yes, sir.
Two or?
Actually, I was hoping you were going to say no, because
No,
I
yeah.
wanted to see the fight.
I mean, ultimately, we would love to be able to have separate pickleball courts, but that's like
Not-
Down the road.
And that can
You
be in the future, but in the short term.
in the future. On the
it's
short
always
term,
something.
if we're looking to match like for like, Yes, so we would have 2 of the courts that would just be for tennis, and then we would paint lines on 2 of the other courts. We've already had that conversation with Mike Lynn, the athletic director, and he's okay with that too. So, yeah, there's nothing that's like MIA, or what is it? Yeah, MIAA, yes. Anything against the rules that say, you know, it has to be a certain orientation, or
Right.
if there's other lines, like, there's nothing in there about that, so it's okay.
And are these courts lit?
They are not. They are not.
We do have in the bid, or in the estimate, I think, conduit, correct?
Yes, yes. So that was something that we wanted to make sure that if we were going to, you know, change these courts, that that framework would already be there, if that's something that we wanted to do in the future.
We just turned the bus headlights on.
Just turn what on?
Turned the bus headlights on.
Oh my goodness gracious. Wow.
Big white reflectors and be fine.
One person, one side would do really well and the other would not.
Yeah.
Yeah, decided winner.
We'll just turn the Kerper field lights.
Yeah.
Maybe. Not close enough. Anything else?
Anything else for Alicia?
Good job.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you, my friends. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good night.
You too.
Right, member input. Anybody? Nothing?
Nothing.
Beautiful.
I'll just throw out.
Public
that-
input.
Just throw out, you were going through the list of warrant articles, and Ryan had mentioned that they had left off the CPC surcharge, but it was intended to be on. For whatever that was.
Yeah, they voted to insert it last week.
Right. but it
So that's why he
wasn't-
wasn't on his
It
list,
wasn't on
yeah.
that list, but he,
But it was already voted, that's
We
why.
already voted it. That's
right. So it will be there at some point in the future.
Yep.
Ryan.
All right, minutes.
We had the minutes from last week,
Yep.
which were wonderful.
Thank you.
I read through them. I thought they were great. I had no changes to suggest.
Second?
Yes, that I approve. Move to approve, Fred.
We have a motion and a second.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Excellent. Next meeting,
Next week.
next week, as long as we can get Ryan here. He thought his schedule would be okay. So next week, and then we can plan on probably something with the select board to discuss, especially the CPC.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ryan will be prepared to go through these articles that the selectmen or select board are putting on the warrant tonight. Okay? With that, we'll adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent.
When
Next
you say
week,
next week, you mean a week from tonight?
next, the 12th, 7 o'clock.